you need to understand who your target market is. I've already identified that. The challenge in healthcare is that there could potentially be, or there potentially are, for audiences, for prospective customers, for stakeholders, if you would, within healthcare. And all four of these stakeholders may or may not interact with and use your product, your service, or your solution. The challenge is that only one of those audiences would be considered the quote economic buyer that your company wants to target. So let's outline who these four audiences are. We mentioned it before. I know I mentioned it in articles and on the podcast before, but we call them the four P's of healthcare. They're policymakers. Think about regulators, people in Congress, stuff like that, people that are affecting the policies and the regulations of the healthcare industry. And that in and of itself is a big giant beast. You have payers. So think Medicare, Anthem Blue Cross, United Health Group, the people that are bearing the largest bulk of the burden of cost of healthcare. You have patients who, again, they're responsible for some of the cost of healthcare. And they're technically the end recipients, the end user or beneficiary of healthcare services that are provided. And then you have provider organizations. So oftentimes when I talk to clients about who their target market is, they confuse user, and this is specifically in the world of healthcare technology and software and devices. They often confuse user with the economic buyer or the actual target market. So in healthcare, for example, a device may be used by a clinician in the practice. It might be used by a patient in the clinic and or at home. And it may be even used by payers for the data that it can track and create and all of that and analyze. The question you need to ask yourself, and this is the question I ask my clients all the time, is like, who's writing the check for this? Because obviously, yes, you need to take into account the people that are going to be interacting, the stakeholders that are going to be interacting with your solution or your service or your product. The ultimate question, though, is who's writing the check? And if there are multiple people, the question is who's writing the bigger check and for whom can you create the biggest value? So the answer to that question is your economic buyer. So whoever is the one swiping the credit card, writing the check, making the purchase decision is the economic buyer. Maybe there could be a couple different economic buyers. If that's the case, you follow the first question that I asked. So like, in what way does our product, service, solution benefit this prospective customer? You want to follow that question up with, in what way does our service, our solution, effectively solve a burning hair problem for this specific stakeholder or buyer? And if you have more than one potential economic buyer, the answer to that second question helps you identify which one you should target first, right? Because if you have two potential economic buyers, you want to target the buyer for whom you can create the greatest value or return on investment through delivering your service or product, whatever. Once you've identified who is most likely to write a check for your solution, product, or service, and what that specific problem is that's going to drive them to make that decision or to write that check, you build a positioning statement around those two factors. So again, think back to that we do X for Y. So it could be something like, we solve this big, hairy, burning hair problem for this economic buyer. So it might be that we solve or we combat or negate low insurance reimbursements or declining insurance reimbursements for private healthcare or private physical therapy practices, whatever it is. So that's basically how healthcare positioning is different, because you need to do a little bit of extra work in identifying who that target, not just the target market is in particular, but like who's actually writing the check for this? How does it interact with these other buyers and stakeholders? Because when you're developing the product, for example, if you're developing a piece of software, you need to think about who is going to be using the software. Is it going to be, well, patients are going to use it in this setting. Providers are going to use it in this setting. Payers might use it to tap into data or for whatever. Regulators or policymakers might also use it So how do we build that functionality in a way that meets all of their needs? But when it comes to positioning and marketing and selling the thing, you need to find out who's writing the check for it, under what circumstances, and what's problem are they trying to solve when they write that check.
If you'd like to learn more about Strata PT and see how our EMR and RCM works, head over to stratapt.com to book a demo.